So many times, like in our discrete trial sessions, it's like you're putting out the letter cards or the number cards and boom, they're on the floor because it's just the easiest way to not do that for that learner.
Yep.
Welcome to the Misfit Behaviorists podcast. Join your hosts, Audra Jensen and Caitlin Beltran, here to bring you evidence-based strategies with a student-centered focus. Let's get started.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Misfit Behaviorists. I'm Caitlin and Audra. Before we jump in, I just want to remind everyone to find us on Instagram at the Misfit Behaviorists podcast and also join our Facebook group of the same name where we are putting in a ton of freebies each week that go along with each episode. So Audra, what are we talking about tonight?
So I was thinking, because we're at like the 6-month mark where we've been doing this for about 6 months, and we're starting to round out what we're going to call this season 1. And Caitlin will talk about that a little bit more next week. But one of the things that I've done is I sent out a survey to everybody, both in the email group and then I think in the Facebook group too, to start to ask people what they're interested in learning about, because we're thinking about going in a different or an additional direction. So one of the things that's coming back as people are filling that out is all about behavior. I mean, big surprise, people want to talk more about behavior in the classrooms and behavior reduction skills sets. And so I thought today we'd touch on a little bit. Most people know what the 4 functions of behavior are, but I thought we'd talk about that a little bit more for those who don't know. And I've got some short little video examples. If you're not watching on YouTube, that's okay. We'll talk through it, but it would be fun because there's some really funny, cute ones. So if you want to go check us out on YouTube, you can do that. So we're going to talk about the 4 functions of behavior.
Awesome.
So my first question is to you. Have you experienced kind of how it's important to know what those functions of behavior are in the work that you've been doing?
Oh, yeah. I mean, in a huge way, because often, I would say all the time, like people will just say, oh, I have this kid and he's, spitting or kicking, or it's like, what should I do? And so we kind of all know, like you mentioned, hopefully most of us have some idea that we should get to the bottom of why that learner is doing that before we just dive in with strategies. That being said, I do have, we have our best practice strategies, more like what not to do with any behaviors, draw more attention to it, or, remove demands and make it like a free break pass. But if you have a learner who, let's say is spitting, you could have 2 learners who are spitting for 2 totally different reasons. So if one of them is spitting to get my attention and one of them is spitting to get out of what they're doing right now, and no one's saying they can't do both of those, do that behavior for 2 different reasons. But typically, in my experience, at least, we do see a lot of the times where learners are engaging in a behavior or a set of behaviors for really one overall driving force. And so if you're not understanding that driving force, you're probably treating it in a way that just doesn't make sense.
Yep. And I've seen over the years, a lot of times when we get called in, we're called in for behaviors. And so he's throwing books, he's, yelling, he's under the table. Those are the things that teachers need help with, and then I have to kind of get them to understand that it really doesn't matter what he's doing. It matters why he's doing it. And it's kind of a paradigm shift for them to realize, they're like, I just want him to stop hiding under the table. Well, let's figure out why he's doing it. So I've always used kind of, we call function over form. Like the why is so much more important than what it's looking like. In fact, when we do our BIPs, our FBAs and BIPs, there's almost always more than one behavior that goes with a certain function. I mean, it's rarely you're going to have a student engaging in challenging behavior, just one behavior. It's usually a class of behaviors or multiple things. And it's not as simple as they're just doing it for attention too. It's, this is what I found the most, is they may engage in a behavior because they want to escape a demand, and then they start getting attention for that behavior. So then the behavior kind of morphs into, now it's being maintained by the attention I'm getting from peers. And so we have to kind of figure out, how do we address different functions of behaviors? But I think the biggest thing is just, it's not as important what they're doing as it is why.
100%. And that's the exact scenario that you were mentioning that was going through my head. Like when teachers or anyone asks me like, okay, so what do I do though? I understand, I want to know why he's doing it, but what do I do when he's doing this? And it's not a bad question. Right. It's just sometimes not the right question, because overall, I could tell you what to do in that moment to maybe minimize or de-escalate, but it's just always going to happen again unless you figure out that unless you pull
Exactly.
back and figure out earlier in that sequence of events,
Exactly.
like why are they, I think of it like, you push the button and the light comes on, or you push the button and the elevator comes on. What's happening when they're pushing that button that they want to get? And how can we teach them a different thing to do than push our buttons? Not literally, but figuratively.
Well, they do that too.
Right.
No, and I think that's the biggest thing is why it's important to figure out what the function is, because once you figure out the function, then you step back, just like you said, and figure out how can we manipulate everything that's going on before and fill their bucket with whatever they're needing, so we don't even get to the behavior, because that's the whole point. I mean, the behaviors are going to happen, and we do have to talk about consequence management and stuff, but it's really, if we can catch these things, if we can take enough data and observation, we can say, hey, he's engaged in these behaviors because he needs more attention earlier in the day. So now let's go back earlier in the day. What can we do to build up his attention bucket? What does he need? More time with the teacher? Does he need time with his peers? Does he need to go get a sticker from the principal? What is it that we can fill him up so that he's not then engaged in that behavior later on to get his bucket filled?
Exactly. I feel like it makes sense when we kind of correlate it to our own lives, like as, functioning adults. If we arrange our own environment for success, we can do that. But oftentimes we're working with, little tiny human beings, or even if they're big human beings, so they just don't have the tools yet to figure out how to do that. And so that's our job. It's not when we write the behavior plan, we always say, we're not giving it to the learner and being like, good luck. We are figuring out how to arrange all those environmental modifications so that we're filling their bucket. We're giving them what they need to prevent the behavior. But if it does happen, how to de-escalate it in that right way, and then just see less and less of that behavior over time and replace it with a functional skill.
Yeah, and it's the same way. Everybody knows the book, The 5 Love Languages or whatever, and it works really well for adults. We figure out what is it that we need to fill love. What is it that our partner needs to fill love? How do we show love? It's the same thing with kids. We need to figure out what their love language is, which is basically what we're doing with this. If they need that connection with people or certain people or whatever, we want to fill that bucket. So yes, that's exactly it. So there are the 4 most common functions that we're going to go over really quickly. And for each one, I got a little video or 2 that I'll talk through. And so the first one, we used to just call it attention seeking. And I like that we're using more of a term now, connection, because it's not just, I want your attention on me. It's really, I'm looking for a connection with somebody, something, which is I need that connection with somebody. So I like that attention connection function. So this first short little video is a commonly used one. Tell me if you've seen this one, Caitlin. I love this one so much because it is a toddler. Have you seen this?
No.
Oh, this is so good. Okay, so for those who can't see, it's a toddler who is engaging in a challenging behavior, in this case, having a tantrum, throwing himself on the floor. And he's got to be, maybe 2 years old. And throughout the video, you're going to see or hear kind of the dad sort of moves his body out of sight so the toddler can't see him. And you'll hear what happens. And as it happens, I'll describe it, but it's really cute. So dad is now out of sight and the crying has stopped. So now the toddler sees dad and dad is moving out of the way. Now can't be seen again. And the crying stops. He sees dad. What's funny when you don't get hearing it is the toddler sees dad and then he drops to the floor and starts crying again.
And it does make sense, like when you think of it, I hate when people say, they're just doing it for attention. But when you reframe it as, he's looking for a connection, right? Well, he's upset, so of course he's looking for a connection. I mean, it's just not always a bad thing. And I think sometimes we have a tendency to write that one off. They're just looking for attention. Well, when I'm upset, sometimes I want attention too.
I want to connect.
Yeah.
Okay, so the second video is, and if you're not seeing it, there's no real words for this. You're going to hear or see if you're watching it. It's a little boy. It's obviously free play. They're playing with blocks. He has a truck. And then he has some friends off in the corner that he obviously wants to get a connection with. And so I'll play it and then I'll tell, for those who aren't seeing it, exactly what happens. So that's a really good one too, because this is what we see a lot in preschool. So the first little boy takes his truck over to where the other kids are playing. And then at first he starts making raspberry sounds. So he's trying to get the attention of a boy who's facing the other way. And then that doesn't get him the attention. So he gets closer. And then I think he hits first. And he still doesn't get the attention. So he ups it a little bit more. And this time he scratches. And in this case, the second little boy did turn around and cry. So he got exactly what he was looking for, which was that attention.
Right. And I think it does remind me of so many classic examples in school settings, like whether it's play or as they get older, maybe just unstructured downtime where kids are chatting and talking. And that one kid, it's that time where they always find themselves, getting in trouble, because they want to be involved with that too, but they don't have the skills to know how to appropriately like navigate that. Or maybe they want in some way that kind of like sneaky attention, but rather than tell, a funny joke, they're doing something to kind of get like that negative attention on them. And one thing that drives me crazy is when people are like, but they know how to get attention. You can see in this video, even that boy had a lot of nice skills. Like he knew right where to drive the truck. He knew to stop. He knew. So I'm guessing he maybe even had words to say, hey, how are you? And so then it becomes like, why couldn't he just ask to play? Or why didn't he do it? But maybe he has skills to do those things, but not in that moment. And that happens to us too. I can do a lot of things, but not on command immediately in every setting until I become really fluent with them. So I think really important to consider too, as we think about learners using the skills they have, but in all of these generalized contexts.
I would also think a lot of the students that I see, they're engaging in these behaviors looking for that negative attention. I like to find out what their home life is, because I often find that a lot of these behaviors, they're getting attention for negative behaviors at home, which is how they've learned to communicate. And they come to school and they're like, well, this is what we do. And so it takes some time for them to realize that, okay, you can't really fix that home environment, but here, these are our expectations, and this is how you get attention here. And in that case, when you're looking at kind of strategies, you want to teach the learner how to access that attention in a quicker and easier and faster, happier way than the negative attention. That does take some time.
And we want to also learn exactly what kind of attention they do want, because if maybe they do come from a really loud, boisterous family, and the attention is way different than me being like, nice job, I like how you're stacking. Like,
that's a great point.
Like, we used to have this learner, and I could say, great job, awesome working all day long. And he'd be like, okay, yeah, okay. But if I was like, what are you doing? You're doing amazing. Like he would just light up. Yeah. And so he would do these like bad behaviors because someone would go, what's going on over here? But then we realized over time that we could just use that level and that tone of voice when he was doing good things and kind of flip it. And everybody's different. So we don't always know that right away until we dig a little.
And I have a learner in mind, as you say that had the opposite. If you had any sort of clap or high volume, he was so sensory overloaded so easily that when he did something right, it had to be like, good job, and then just maintain. And if you made a big deal about it, he would undo it. So it's just knowing that learner. Okay, so the second function of behavior we want to talk about is access to tangibles. So that's when a behavior is aimed at getting something that the child wants, asking for a cookie or engaging in a behavior to get the cookie. And I like to say, asking the husband to go out to dinner because I know I can order the chocolate cake there that I'm craving. So, we all engage in these behaviors as well to access something. So access to tangibles and escape are probably the two that I see the most. So I have a video for this one. All right, so those not watching, just listening, this is going to be a little girl and a dad having a conversation. And I'll explain what she says after there's captions. So if you're watching it, you can hear it easily.
Do you know what diarrhea is? Diarrhea is icky poopies. Why do you want it? I can't give you diarrhea. Why do you want diarrhea?
Oh, maybe you can't understand what she said. I just think that's hilarious. I don't want diarrhea. Okay. So that's just a silly little video. Obviously, we all know what access looks like, especially in a school environment. So preschool in particular, they want what they want when they want it. And it's really hard for them to understand either waiting longer or not getting something they want or more fruit snacks or, that's a really, really tough one for that age group.
For sure. I was just in a classroom today and we were talking about using for a really early learner, some of her chips or extra chips or something for one of her rewards. And I was like, don't even bring the bag out because this is a really early learner. And she's going to think bag of chips, all of them, snack. Like she's historically, when has anyone ever given you like one chip at a time?
Yeah.
It can be kind of triggering when you see the bag and then all of a sudden, no, you can't have the bag. You're just getting one. So I was like, just show the one chip and then give it. So she's getting all the chips she sees, which is the one. But just a reminder that, again, knowing the context, like we think maybe a chip being is a nice reward, but they want what they want when they want it. So they see a bag of chips, they want that whole bag of chips now.
This totally makes me think of, I love those organic blue tortilla chips. And when I'm working, because I do a lot of computer work, and I find that, I'm just snacking on those because it gives me something to do. And then before I know it, there's, half the bag is gone.
Right.
So that's a really good lead into what the strategy is. So as soon as I'm aware of what's going on, I move the bag. I'm like, okay, this needs to get out of here.
A little bit harder to get to.
Yes. Okay, so the third function of behavior is escape or avoid. So that's when a behavior is helping someone avoid something they don't want to do. And there is a kind of a subtle difference between escape and avoid. So escaping is, a task or something is happening in the moment. They have a behavior because they want out of it. And then avoiding is obviously they can see or know that something's coming. And so they're engaging in behavior to avoid it ever beginning. And there's just a very subtle difference of just being aware of it. So there's like a student throwing a pencil, and when you give them a math worksheet, a preschooler running across the field when the bell rings. We get this a lot. And that, like for us, it's like hitting the snooze button to avoid getting up, and that just gives it longer.
Yeah, so many times, like in our discrete trial sessions, it's like you're putting out the letter cards or the number cards, and boom, they're on the floor because it's just the easiest way to not do that for that learner.
Yep. All right. So in this video, those of you who are watching, you're going to see the text and what's going on. And the little girl, it looks like it's a conversation between a girl and a dad. It looks like she's been asked to put her empty bowl in the sink. And you'll see that she asserts that it's too heavy.
What's the problem? Can't lift that up? No! Come back and try again. I think you can lift it up to the sink and you can help clear the table.
That reminds me so much of my own son. He's 7, and if we're coming in from the car and he asks me to carry something, I'll be like, look, my hands are full. So now he'll have one thing in his hand. He'll be like, my hands are full. I can't my hands are so full. I'm like, you're not using this right. But he's communicating, trying to get out of doing something for sure.
So I love that too, because she's very creative. Her bowl is obviously empty and it doesn't make her, she's like, it's too heavy. Yeah. So for those who couldn't see it, she was asserting that her tiny little plastic bowl was too heavy, and the grunting was her trying to pick up the bowl. And what I really like is that dad was doing a really good job of addressing behavior, not making a big deal about it, not getting all mad, just sort of talking it through. I know you can do it. So that's a really good strategy.
Go, Dad.
So then the fourth function is sensory or automatic reinforcement. And this is when a behavior provides some sort of sensory input. It's an internal need. And this is often, I found over the years that a lot of times we have a lot of staff that don't understand kind of what sensory is, and they'll think every behavior is sensory related. And so it's when you think about it, I can almost always pinpoint some other function that's going on that may look like a sensory thing. So this is really where you have your behavior team, somebody who really specializes in ironing out what these are. But I will show 2 short little videos. The first one is kind of your classic autism self-soothing behaviors like rocking, hand flapping, ringing, vocalizations. And these almost always, unless these behaviors are really doing harm to the student or to anybody else, really doing harm, we don't want to address these behaviors. If you have a student who happens to be in your class who's engaging in autism self-soothing behaviors like this, who cares? It's fine. Kids will get over it. It's just, don't worry about this one. So I'm going to show you kind of an example of this one. Most of you will have recognized this. So just classic self-stimulatory behaviors. I don't know, Caitlin, if you've seen this new guy who's going around, I just love following him. His name's Torin.
I don't think so.
Torin something. He's 16 years old. He is very verbal. but he's kind of classically autistic too. And so he's able to talk about some of these behaviors that he engages in, just like this. And to describe it, I think you need to look him up. It's Toren. I don't remember what his last name is, but he's really good because it's like being able to get into the mind of somebody who, I'm not in that mind. And so he describes kind of how this is a self-soothing, and I remember my son had lots of these behaviors, especially earlier on when he had to kind of regulate. And we had to learn that these are not behaviors that we need to address. He's regulating himself.
It reminds me of Temple Grandin when she talks about needing the squeezes and wanting that really deep pressure. And it's, if you didn't understand that and just saw someone, because a lot of our kids will scrunch themselves up into a ball or go underneath something, not in a defiant way, but more just stimulatory way. You've seen those mats that like go together and it doesn't look like you could fit through it, but like you could fit through it like a squeeze machine.
Yes.
I love those because they get that sensation of being squeezed, and that might not be comfortable or pleasant at all to another person, but to them it is.
Yeah,
but you were mentioning like some of the behaviors like the flapping or the squeezing, like absolutely that's a regulatory method. Like I wouldn't interfere with it, but sometimes we have a lot of learners who like chew things with their well, I know you have a story, but like chewing their shirt or their pencil, and then it becomes hygiene or germs, or like I've had some learners who will pick or chew their fingernails like until they bleed. So those are the times where it's okay, we're trying to teach you some other way to regulate yourself. And I like that I'm seeing a lot of the newer fidgets coming out where it's okay, this one's really matches the like form of a function, either or form. I'm mixing it up, like picking, or this one is like a rubbing or something like that.
I think you've touched on it. Super important, like finding, and that's kind of when you think about if you have to address some of these self-stimulatory behaviors or the self-soothing stuff, is to find something that can replace that same need. So, I mean, I think I've told you before that my son used to chew because he was a chewer, and he chewed through Xbox controllers like crazy, which is so weird. He chewed through zippers and all sorts of things. So we taught him to chew gum. And so for a long time, and it took a number of years, and now he doesn't need it anymore, but a number of years that he was constantly chewing gum, so to get that feedback that he was looking for. So we weren't just telling him to stop it. I didn't want him chewing up Xbox controllers. Those are expensive. So we did have to teach him a skill in order to kind of replace that need that he was seeking.
Right. And you hear the example all the time, and I'm sure this was true for your son. If you're just telling him like, just stop chewing, stop chewing, stop chewing, it's like kind of like that whack-a-mole where it's like, all right, I'll stop chewing this, but I will start chewing this.
And that's going to be worse.
Rotate to another item, which is not what we want, unless it's something appropriate like gum, or could find another outlet. Like taffy works well because it's like the resistance sometimes.
Yeah. So here's the other short video of this one. So in this one, you're going to see a 3-year-old. They're lighting a candle for her birthday, and then they're going to sing a song. And I really like this example because you can see initially she looks like she's cool with everything. And then one thing is they start the sparklers on the cake, and that overwhelms her. And then when they start singing the birthday song, that's too much. So this is one of those cases where you may have triggered an additional behavior happening because she got initially overstimulated. And so here, I'll show this for those who are watching. She's covering her ears. You can see she's on that edge. So that, I think it's a really good example of where you might have seen her. Maybe she would have been able to handle the happy birthday song, had they not, it should not be overwhelmed initially, or maybe they needed to sing it quieter, or maybe have her sing it. There's other things that maybe wouldn't have triggered that response.
I know a lot of kids who do not like being sung to, and you know what? I don't really like it either because nobody knows what you're supposed to do.
It's really awkward.
It's very awkward, but that can be so overwhelming in a lot of sensory stimulation ways.
Right. So those are the 4 functions. I thought it'd just be fun to show videos and kind of talk about them. We're not going to kind of go into strategies at this point because I think we are interested in doing something kind of more targeted to behaviors and stuff that we're going to create for everybody. So we'll do part of that, and Caitlin will talk about that a little bit more next week. I will put the survey that I've been collecting that your interest in into the show notes as well. So please chime in what you're interested in hearing about and learning about. I think the biggest thing, the most important thing is that when a learner is engaged in disruptive or challenging behaviors, think to yourself, what are they trying to communicate? What's the need? And then talk about that. Think about that, Think about, like we talked about beforehand, what can we do to fill that need, to fill that bucket for them so that that behavior doesn't have to happen at all in the first place?
Right. What are they trying to get? And how can I teach them to get an appropriate, to get that appropriately if possible?
Right.
Okay, so that was awesome. I think this was a really cool review, especially as we're thinking of back to school season, which is upon us for some of us and around the corner for some of others. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram, join our Facebook group, and definitely check out that survey in our show notes so you can have input into kind of what direction we're going next and what topics you want to see covered. I think that's it for this week. Join us next week.
See ya.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Misfit Behaviorists, and be sure to tune in next week for more tips and tricks. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss an episode.